Hey, happy Saturday, everybody. I'm Nick Slavik. I am the proprietor of the Nick Slavik Painting and Restoration Company. I'm also the host of this show, Ask a Painter Live. It's a weekly live Facebook show where I use my over almost 3 decades now, my 29th year of experience to answer any of your questions. And as always, I don't have all the answers, but this community, this forum of people does. There are some of the brightest craftspeople, most aggressive, progressive entrepreneurs in the world who are members of the Ask a Painter community and of this show and watch it regularly. So if I don't have the answers, the people here do. Today we're going to be talking about the basics of wood finishing, and this type of wood finishing being staining and clear coating. And a whole bunch of things in there. I'm going to get to all your questions a little bit later. If you're interested in the PCA, the Painting Contractors Association, I would urge you to follow the link in this show later on. The thing I described about Ask a Painter, the group of the finest craftspeople, the aggressive entrepreneurs, that's them as well. Look into it. I want to thank Minwax and Purdy for underwriting this show and bringing you some of my favorite products. For 30 years, I've been using Minwax and Purdy, and I have a depth of knowledge, a large data set, and we are going to get to that. So again, before we jump into the basics here, I want to tell you guys that I am going to be giving away some stuff. If you're watching this show, you can do a couple things. I made it really easy. You got to do 3 things to win something in this show. I'm going to pick somebody at random when this show is over to give away a $75 prize pack of Minwax stuff. So all you got to do is follow Minwax on social media, link below, follow Purdy, link below, and then comment in this show, and we will pick at random somebody to send something out. So as always, folks, I'm all about giving back to the community, and Minwax and Purdy is going to help me this week. So basics of what we call in the industry as professionals SSV, stain, seal, varnish. When we look at home plans, we look at things that give us specs for either painted trim, painted cabinets, or SSV trim. Now, we don't always stain, seal, varnish in that thing. SSV is a moniker for that type of finish where we have a piece of natural wood, we color it, and then we protect it with something. Now, the basics of wood finishing. This can go from 0 to 100 really, really fast. I prefer 1 coat of stain, the color, and 2 coats of clear over the top of it. That is the simplest finishing system you can do. I have done world-class finishing with nothing more than that. You can dye, you can overlay, you can tone, you can apply 4 different coats of finish, you can do this and that. But for DIYers, for homeowners, the basic, the most thorough, good job you can do is stain it, color it, and then finish it with 2 coats of stuff. And in that lane, we're going to talk about 2 separate systems. There's a water-based system and a solvent system. But before we do that, I'm going to talk about one of the more difficult things that pros and homeowners, DIYers have to encounter with this process, which is stain matching. So typically, I'm given a project from a homeowner, and they say, hey, here's a picture of something, or here's a piece of inspiration that we want this thing to look like. Can you do that? And now the problem is, if you have a paint color, you can take that paint color, you can take a pillow, you can take a shirt, you can take a hunk of a wall and get it stain matched at the actual paint store, and they can get you a perfect match every time because they just put it into a computer, it analyzes it, and translates it into a paint color. Readily available, there is not that for stain matching. So it's a little bit of knowledge, it's a little bit of experience, but I will give you a couple tips to help make that a little bit easier. So typically I'm given something, and as most of you had followed along this last month, the Jaeger House project, it's a historic home that we were redoing the whole house, but then there's an addition onto the house where the homeowner put brand new white oak on here like this, and he wanted me to match it. Now, again, there are lots and lots of things I can do to get that wood color, and I'll show you here an example. There are complex stain matches like this, which we'll get to in a second. But my goal, first off, is always to find 1 stain that approximates the color and then 2 coats of finish over the top to do that. One of the biggest pro tips I can give you is, when you're doing a stain match, apply finish over the top of this. So this side of the sample, obviously we have bare wood here. I put 1 coat of stain, let it dwell for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, wiped it off, and then what I did after it dried overnight, I put a finish on this side. You can see the drastic color change between just bare stain and this. There's a lot of times that wood has that beautiful amber, that warmth, that glow. That can actually come from the finish. So when you're doing stain samples for a client or for yourself, get the stain on, let it dry overnight, and apply at least 1 coat of finish over the top. Now, if you can't get the depth, the problem with, not the problem, the limitations of a system of staining and 2 coats of finish, sometimes you can't get bright enough, vibrant enough, deep enough, or dark enough in that. In that case, you got to get complex. So me being the crazy restorationist that I am, I approximated some of the most popular historic wood finishes here. So this is my method of getting that next layer of stuff. If you can't get it with 1 coat of stain and 2 coats of finish, what you can do is you can actually dye or stain or color the wood a very bright, sort of vibrant color, and then overlay a standard pigment stain, you know, like one of these here on there. You can actually use a water-based wood stain, some people call it dyes and things like that, and a very bright orange, very bright yellow, to first kind of give the wood that underlying tone, and then you can see I progressed here through a pigment stain, nothing different than this, like a min-wax penetrating stain over the top, and then of course you see my finish over here too. This storyboard, which we call story sticks or storyboards, is something I would bring into a client's home and say, okay, we have this approximates a lot of the very historic sort of woodwork in my area. So we can say, depending on the level of sun that hits it, we have a light version, we have a dark version, but when we bring it into the house, we can actually set it up against the trim, and we can say, oh, okay, so it's this one here. We're gonna use this one, it's antique walnut, and it's got a yellow sort of thing underneath. So again, complex versions here, but again, this is about 3 to 4, well, I would say this one's got about 6 different colors of penetrating stain, 2 different colors of dye, and I actually mix the dyes in different ratios. So again, my goal is always 1 coat of stain, 2 coats of finish, but if you can't, this is what's available to you if you really want to. So stain matching as well. Being a pro, sometimes I'm not given something for inspiration. Sometimes, you know, the minimum of what we need is show me what you want me to look like. And if it's actually something I can have, a cabinet door, a piece of furniture, something like that, I will match it, or I will go through my custom match process. 2 lanes when you have that. You have pre-mixed stains, kind of like this one. This one is an ebony. It's a very, very dark blackish tinted stain. Or through some stores, you actually have the Performance Series where they can custom tint you some stains. So I always try to hit it with the pre-mixed stains first, because insanely consistent colors, and you usually don't have to wait then for a stain match. But if you can't hit it with a pre-mixed stain, you can use a custom tinted stain like that. And a lot of times I work very closely with my people at these paint stores to do that. And also, if you want to find any of this stuff, I did put a link below to the nearest store to you. So, but sometimes a client says, I want your inspiration. So then what we do is this. I make a larger storyboard, and they say, well, we're gonna have our whole basement done with this custom solid mahogany. This is solid mahogany. Not many people get the benefit of ever having touching stuff like this in their life. We had a project a couple years ago that was that, and I actually created this for the client because it's a very important project. And they did not want just clear coat over the top. They wanted to produce an aged effect. So aging in this case is not a decorative finish, it's the depth of stain. So what I did is I went through my stain library. I took some inspiration from different mahogany that I've seen in my life or found from the internet, and I basically laid out stain, 1 coat of finish, and 2 coats of finish. It was so important for me. You could see the different layers of shine on this one here. It was so important to me that we get the actual look of the coating, that I actually did 2 full coats of finish on here. So you can see we stepped out stain in the middle, 1 coat of finish, 2 coats of finish here. And sometimes I will bring this to the client and say, let's pick one together. Let's do this. So again, it seems like it's very subtle and things like this, but if you're finishing tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars of new wood, it's an important step to go through. And if this takes a couple hours for you to create, cheap insurance, I'll say. So, oh, I should show you this. This is satisfying. This was the finished product that the that the client wanted. So stain and then 2 coats of finish over the top. It was a beautiful, beautiful process. So, okay, so now that you have your stain match, which is one of the hardest things to do, now you get to sort of the fun and the easy and the satisfying stuff, which is actually putting some color and some finish on some wood. So, like I mentioned, the 2 lanes. Typically, as a pro, I will use solvent-based finishes for almost everything I do. Because of the popularity of some whitewash, some pickled, some gray wash, some driftwood type finishes now, you actually need to go water-based finishes. The benefit of a solvent-based system, which is this right here, is it's got a lot of open time, which means it stays wet for a long time. It's very, very user-friendly and forgiving. So you can do all manners of sort of things with oil-based stain, or excuse me, solvent-based stain, solvent-based finish, and you're gonna get a really good finish. You can mess up the dry times, you can mess up the prep, you can do this and that, and really it's forgiving. With water-based, the benefit, or excuse me, with solvent-based, you do get that amberish, that warmth to it, which I personally love. The problem is on some projects, like a whitewash or a gray wash, you don't want that yellow, so then you have to go with a water-based system. A water-based system will leave you as close to a crystal clear finish as you can possibly get. So if we're taking a piece of nice red oak here, whitewashing it, pickling it, as us traditionalists call it, if you put a solvent-based over the top, it will amber it. That's not a bad thing, but if the look you're going for is as white as possible, you're gonna have to go with the water-based finish over the top. So sometimes the finish will actually dictate which products you go with. You can also get a pickling in a solvent-based system, but obviously if you want that, you'll get the benefit of the more whitewash look, the more pickled look if you do water-based system here. So before we apply any of the stain, I want to talk about prep with this stuff. So I will tell you this, when you're dealing with a finish that you can see through, it is not as forgiving as a primed and painted surface. If something goes wrong on a primed or painted surface, you can sand it, you can fix it, you can patch it, and do some more. With this, it is less forgiving. You're going to see everything underneath. I will tell you this, from a pro's experience, on every single new construction remodel, when we're given a whole bunch of new doors, new cabinets, new trim, and we're going to stain and put some sort of clear on the top, I will bet, and I expect, about 20 to 30% of all the new wood in there to have some sort of blemish, watermark, glue stain, mar, something that I have to fix. So don't get discouraged. There are some manufacturing flaws, and the deeper the color you go, the less forgiving it's gonna be. It's gonna show more of those flaws. But I'm gonna show you a really quick and easy way to fix a lot of those common flaws after we get these things stained. The first thing I do though, is we go through a very, very light SVT process. And the viewers of this show and follow, SVT is sand, vac, and tack. So I prefer little sanding sponges like this, medium grit, fine grit, something like that. What we're doing here is not removing wood like carpenters. What we're doing is scuffing it just to make sure that it gives it a little bit of tooth. It gives us a chance to inspect it. If we have to touch and look at every inch of this, we're gonna find a lot of flaws that we wouldn't have if we just went straight to staining. Also, what it's gonna do is a very sneaky thing, which is it's going to even out the porosity of the wood. So all these pieces come from probably different trees, different age of trees. You can see here, we got some end grain right here. We got a little darker piece, which is probably heartwood. We got a lighter piece, which is probably sapwood from a tree. This, depending on the machine it went through, is gonna take stain different than this. So by giving it a very, very light scuff sand, you can put the odds in your favor that the stain will penetrate more evenly. And typically a scuff sand is nothing more than, you know, and obviously you want to sand with the grain with all this stuff. You can add in a whole bunch of sanding marks if you go against the grain. So where the joints meet like this, you just got to be pretty careful to finish off in the direction of that. Typically then what we would do is in the SVT process is the V is the vacuum. So we would take a shop vac with a brush attachment like that to agitate the dust and get it off there. For this purpose, because we didn't make a lot of dust, we'll go right to tack rag. We just use microfiber. We wet it down with a tiny bit of water. You really don't want it to feel wet to the touch hardly at all. And then you'll just kind of wipe down the cabinet door. So even if you do this, chances are there's still going to be some flaws here. And the fun part about being a master craftsman is you know that a lot of them aren't going to show up until you put stain on it. And like I said, the darker the stain, the more pronounced they're going to be. So sometimes you get a perfect door. Sometimes you get one that's been brought through the rain and then it shows all the water spots. So interestingly enough, funny story, we were working on a whole house remodel and about 200 pieces of cabinetry, brand new stuff like this. The cabinet maker brought into the house and installed. Typically, no problem, right? Except it was raining that day and they brought them all in through the rain. And what happens is every time that water drop hit those cabinets, that little drop of water raised the grain in that little area and it accepted stain differently than the rest of the wood. Those little water drops everywhere were darker. The problem is you can't look at this with the naked eye and discern whether that's going to happen or not. So basically we're staring at a whole house, a 5,000 square foot house. Every bit of cabinetry is basically leopard printed, and we had to do something called wet sanding, which I'll show you in just a second here. So, but again, those are the fun things you run into with this. Now, if we were priming and painting that stuff, you prime over it, you sand it all down, perfect, not a problem. With staining and varnishing, throws a little wrinkle in there. So when it gets to application, you actually have to do some different things for a water-based system versus a solvent-based system. Now, you can apply with a rag and wipe off with a rag. That's a general idea. You put some stain on and you take it off with a rag. This is not a paint where you just cake it on and leave it. You can use a rag, you can use brush, or you can use a sprayer. But either way, you want to remove the excess stain in there because you want an even finish. Now, with a water-based system, Purdy Nylox Sprig, this is one of my favorite brushes that's ever been invented. It's not just good for this, it's good for a lot of things, but it is an insanely soft nylon bristle brush. It has some of the finest bristles you can get like this. My go-to for fine finishing is this one right here. Now, Nylox is the type of brush with the bristles. Sprig is a name they give it to kind of connotate that it's a straight cut. My version that I prefer is a 2.5, and it's got that nice beaver tail handle because I like a little thicker handle when we do stuff like that. Now for solvent-based finishing, this is really interesting. This is a trick that I've learned from decades and decades of finishing, which is brushes make the difference. This is a world-class brush, my favorite. The problem is it doesn't perform as well with oil-based penetrating stain as a natural bristle brush. Interestingly enough, like this one is the Purdy white bristle. It's also called a sprig, but it's in a 3-inch version here. I like mine to hold a little more stain in there. A natural bristle brush is actually the bristles, the hair from an animal, a hog. So sometimes you'll hear these referred to as hog bristle, China bristle, China brush, things like that. You can get them in natural versions, which I like, or the black versions, which are dyed. The interesting thing, what makes these more effective is natural hair is actually hollow on the inside, and it will suck up stain, hold it, and release it more evenly. If you ever notice, you use a nylon bristle brush with some penetrating stain, some solvent stuff, sometimes it flicks and drips a little more than you want. This solves that. The hollowness of an actual natural hair will hold more of that stain and release it more evenly. Give it a try sometime. It's super satisfying to see. So for purposes of this right now, we are going to apply with a rag because it's just a small project. If you have a small piece of furniture, a little piece of cabinetry, 1 or 2 doors, something like that, I usually just go to a wadded up stain rag, put the stain on, and then wipe it off. So I'm gonna get this set up, and we're gonna actually apply 2 of sort of my the most common decorative finishes that I see of wood. Typically when we get on some new construction or remodels, people want it whitewashed or very white, or they want it very, very dark. So I thought I would show you the simple 3-step go-to processes for both of this stuff. So, all right, I'm gonna clear this stuff out here. We'll go solvent-based first. So to aid in the staining, I'm going to use a couple rolls of tape to elevate my cabinet door off of the table here. I have a little cotton rag that I've wadded up into a little stain pad like this. And we have our water-based wood stain. So this is the pickling version, the whitewash version like this. And basically the idea is get it on there, saturate it, let it soak up, and then wipe it off. Now, before I get going on this stuff too, again, remember the giveaway. I'm gonna give away to one random viewer of this show today a $75 prize pack from Minwax. So again, all you have to do is like and follow Minwax, like and follow Purdy, and then comment on the show below. As soon as I get through the finishing process of this, we're gonna take a look at all of your questions on here, and we'll see what we can answer. So again, simple project like this, we're not gonna use a brush or a sprayer, we're just gonna use a rag, saturate the rag. And typically what I like to do is the parts that you think you're probably gonna miss first. So I like to get in there, saturate all those little crevices. And it's important that, you know, right now the goal of this process is not to wipe off as you go. The goal is to saturate the wood completely, and the next step is to actually then remove. So we'll get it on there nice and thick so it can soak up. Nice methodical. You're just laying it on there. It doesn't have to be pretty at this stage. Tip it to make sure I get this edge here. And with any water-based or solvent-based wood stain, you want to keep a wet edge, and you don't want things to dry out. If it dries out, it's going to be very hard to wipe off. So again, as you see things sort of absorbing at different rates, you can apply. Like this piece right here with some end grain is gonna suck it up differently than a straight cut piece. Okay, because this is water-based, we can just throw this right in the trash. For the purposes of this, we also have a water can on site, so we put any stain rags. Okay, and then cotton rag, lint-free rag. I just make it so it's something thicker in your hand like this. Get this out of here. And then you just want to wipe it off like this, evenly. And again, the process that I've developed over the years is get the bulk of it off and then work the fine details at the end. So what I'm not doing is trying to fix all the little cracks and crevices right now. What I am trying to do is just get the bulk of it off so it dries evenly. And then at this stage, what you're looking at is you got some leftover in the corners, things like that. And you're sweetening up those corners a little bit. Now, you gotta have even pressure and you gotta kind of work methodically. If you push too hard in one particular area, you can actually release a little more of the stain like that. So very easy, light and easy. And what I don't like to do is get that one layer between your finger and then start rubbing like that, because not only it'll saturate the rag, it'll actually remove some stain. I like to have a nice wadded up thing like this. This, if you have enough cushion right here and you press into the corners, will conform to the corners and get that stain out. All right, water-based trick as well. Now, anytime you add water to wood, what's going to happen is you're going to raise the grain. A trick that I learned from actually wood floor finishers is something called water popping, which is when you have a bare cabinet door, before you even apply the stain, what you can do is either rag on a bunch of water, spray on some water, and wipe it off with a rag, and that will actually soak into the wood, raise the grain preemptively, so that before you stain the piece of wood, you can actually knock it down with that SVT process again. Now, again, we want to keep it simple, so this stuff doesn't actually raise the grain of this oak that I'm working on very much, so what I did was just stain it right here. But if you do have a softwood, if you're doing this over pine or poplar or something, it would be good to water pop that wood and get it smooth before you do it. It'll just save you a step later on. Now, what we're trying to do then is if you just have a stained piece of wood, what you don't want to do is start sanding this, because you're going to remove color. So what you'd have to do if you did raise the grain of your wood, my preference is always to put the first coat of finish on and then sand it down, because you're actually sanding the finish and not the actual wood like that. So that's a stained piece. We will move that out of the way. And now we'll do the solvent-based system here. So we'll take another cabinet door like this. Now, on this one, I'm going to show you a little trick on how to fix some flaws. So I'm hoping there's an actual natural flaw. Usually I expect one flaw here. We'll fix it. If not, we'll simulate one and do that for you. Okay, so again, little stain pad like this. And I've been sure right before the show, I stirred up my solvent-based stain here. This one happens to be ebony because we are asked to do a whole bunch of very, very deep wood finishing nowadays. So again, here we go. Move this out of here just so we don't contaminate. So the idea again is get it on, keep a wet edge, don't let it dry. And if you see it drying, you can always put a little bit on there. Making sure to get it in all the cracks, all the crevices. See it soaking in. I'm just going to keep it wet as I work, not forgetting the edges. Okay, so typically when we do a really dark stain like this, I'm going to flip it around just to make sure I get all the little crevices here. So with a very dark stain like this, you're going to see some of the end grain starting to soak it up. The goal of usually these ebony stains and things like this is to really have that stain soak in. So typically what I'll do is make sure that we hit full saturation, and I'll just keep rubbing it on like this just to make sure, because again, the end grain is soaking it up. The other straight cut parts are not. So I really want to make sure we get full saturation so we get the benefit of like an ebony stain like this, the solvent base like that. So it looks like it's soaking it up very evenly like that. Now, safety tip, especially from somebody who does this with whole houses and you use, 10 gallons of stain or something, this stuff will spontaneously combust if you leave this in an enclosed area for a prolonged period of time. So what I learned from an old pro is you get a water can and you immediately dunk your stain stuff in there so it doesn't spontaneously combust. And again, we have lint-free cotton towel. I'm going to make it into a little stain pad here and get my solvent-based stain out of here. And then basically once we see that it's reached saturation, you can see some of the wet parts here. We're not going to have that stain soak in anymore. So I'll start with the edges, nice and light. Again, the first pass in wiping should basically be getting the bulk of the stuff off. Again, you can fine tune the stain as you get the cabinet door progressed a little bit. So, all right, so getting in there to the grooves, just getting the bulk of it off. Again, you want to rotate a little bit here. Give it another pass like this. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm just inspecting for flaws right now. So what I'm seeing is, it looks like from the manufacturing process, there's a little bit of sanding marks right here where, the rail and the stile meet like this with perpendicular grains. And when it's sanded, there's a little bit of sanding scratches in one of the pieces. So what we're going to do is a technique that I've developed over the years to fix this stuff called wet sanding. So typically what we would do is we have one of our sanding blocks like this. If you have a little area like this where there's some blemishes, what we will do, take a very light amount of the stain like this, saturate that area, also saturate the end of your sanding sponge like this. And then what you can do is the grain of this rail goes this way, the grain of this stile goes that way. So what we'll do is we'll sand right up to the joint like this. And again, wet sponge, this is called wet sanding. You want there to be a proliferation of stain in there to do this work. If it dries out, you're basically just grinding the wood. And we'll sand this way. And then what you do is just wipe to inspect how we did. Okay, a little better. There's still the faintest little bit of sanding scratches there, so I'm going to saturate this again. All right, that's much better. Good. Now, the only thing you want to be careful for, let's say you have a glue mark, a mar, something in the middle of a panel like this. You're going to have to do that to the whole panel, because if you just sand one particular area, you could lighten or darken that area. I will say this too, the more you have to get after it with wet sanding, you can change the porosity of the wood, and sometimes it'll accept more or accept less. That would be the problem. And you'll have a light or a dark spot there. So again, for minor things, instead of sending this cabinet door back and saying, oh, it's garbage, we can't fix it, or there's a glue mark on it, get us a new one. Sometimes that can be 6 weeks. A good craftsperson can fix this on site and get it going. So again, just a quick way to fix some of the common flaws like that. I'll get rid of this stuff. Again, we will dunk water can like this. Okay, so now that we got our wood stain, we're going to talk about finishing. And I'm going to clear this out of the way here. Okay, so now I have done this process 24 hours ago to these cabinet doors here. We have the whitewash, the water-based stain on those, and then we have the solvent-based on these right here. And I'm going to show you a couple of different ways. We'll describe a couple of different ways that you can do your finishing, your clear over the top, and we're going to actually put a little finish on these doors. So on an easy project like this, typically what I would do is just brush. If it's a small piece of furniture, if it's one little vanity, something like that, brushing is probably going to be the easiest. You can certainly spray if you like. For most DIYers, you can get into spraying pretty easy. You can buy one of those compressed air cup guns for 35 bucks from somewhere, hook it to an air compressor, put a little of this in it, and it works pretty good. Otherwise, I would probably go airless or HVLP for your sprayers. When we do whole houses, we use airless just because of the production and the amount of finish that we can put on. But for stuff like this, we can brush today. So for the solvent-based system like this right here, this is dried for 24 hours. It is ready to go. There's no dust on this piece. And we're gonna use Minwax Performance Series, the fast dry varnish. And I usually prefer satin, something with a little bit lower shine. I think it gives a little more sophisticated look. Extra shine is not a bad thing. It's just aesthetically different. One doesn't clean up or one isn't any more durable than the other one. So same thing goes for the finishes as well as the stains, which is natural bristle. You wanna pair these together. Now, one word before we start mixing and matching and using different coating systems. My preference and your life is going to be so much easier if you stick with either water-based finishing for stain and finish or solvent-based for stain and finish. You can cross, you can mate the two, but the only piece of advice I would give you is if you're going to use a solvent-based stain like this and go to a water-based finish, I would let this dry for a long time, many, many, many days to make sure that all the solvent has evaporated out of here. Likewise with the water-based stuff, whenever you're doing water-based with an oil-based top coat, oil-based with a water-based top coat, give it extra time to dry. There is no rush. The most heartbreaking thing you can do is go through all the work of getting your project, getting inspiration, doing the stain match, applying the stain, letting it dry. If you rush it, your project will be ruined and you'll have huge adhesion problems. So give it the proper time to dry. But if you stick within the lane of either water-based or solvent-based, very, very forgiving. And I know that especially when DIYers get after at home, sometimes you're doing it in a garage that's maybe not heated as well. You're doing it on weekends and evenings. And if you do happen to not follow the procedures perfectly, they are pretty forgiving. So we're gonna do the solvent-based right here. Again, natural bristle brush. We're gonna saturate the end of those bristles. And typically when I finish, I like to do it in a very, very methodical way, which is work from the outside, work from the lips of the actual panel, and then finish off with the flat surfaces. So what I will do is I like to hit the edges first because that's the way I train my apprentices, is typically the edges are something that somebody will miss if they're not doing it. People like to attack the middles of the panels first. I like to really go for the edges and the things like that that you know you're gonna miss or have the tendency to miss in a long, long project. You know, if you have a couple hundred cabinet doors to do, you want to get a system down where you can almost robotically work through these things. So then we'll do the panel, saturating, and from the pro side of finishing, I've always been in favor of a method where you just get a bunch of finish on and then you finish it off with the strokes. Because again, just like with the staining, I believe you can do a little more production, a little bit better when you get it on there and then finish it off. So again, I did the inner panel and I'm working on the rails and stiles now. And you can see, you have to be really careful about where you brush. If you drag a brush against the wood like this, you're gonna get a huge drip on the outside. So what you'll see me do is brush out of the corners like this, away from the corners, so we don't get a big drag on there. And again, we're getting it on, and then we will finish it off. So then what we'll do is I like to give it a drag on the outside, a finish stroke, brushing away from the corners. Then I like to hit the inner panel to make sure all these ridges didn't collect any finish. Almost everybody can do the big flat part perfectly. It's all the little bits and pieces, the technical stuff, that usually create the flaws for people. So I just like to make sure there's not an excess there. Get the panel good. Brush away from the corners like this. There we are. One coat, beautiful solvent-based finish on this stuff. This stuff will dry very quickly. The next process in this finishing would be to SVT and one last coat, and that is it, folks. This is one of the most insanely durable, insanely beautiful processes you can go through. Unlike some other production-based or finishes like that, this stuff stands up insanely well to water and wear and tear. I've done projects where 25 years ago with my old family business, I did them as a kid, hand finished all of them. When I was just getting introduced to this, I visited some today and they are still looking good, which is a true testament to, you know, some of these solvent-based systems. Okay, so water-based systems. So again, same thing here. We have our whitewash over here. This is dried overnight like this, and we're going to use a water-based finish for this because we want it to be as crystal clear as possible. Ambering is a thing that I actually look for in woodwork. When you look at wood samples like this, you want that beautiful tone of that amber. You can see what a solvent-based finish will do to something like that. But when you're doing a pickling project or a whitewash or a gray wash or a driftwood kind of project, these are finishes that are very of the age today. People ask for them quite a bit. This is the simplest way to get it. You can doctor up all your own methods for it, but honestly, the one coat sort of whitewash and then a couple coats of clear over the top is really the way to go. So if you want to maintain this look, if you want to alter it as little as possible, water-based finish is the way to go. Again, you will never go wrong with one of these guys. These are my go-to for lots of fine finishing. So the same thing applies here. Saturate some bristles. And we're going to start with the edges. Again, brushing away from the corners like that. Just coating all those surfaces. And while I'm doing this, again, reminder to everybody who did not catch the show from the start, I'm going to be giving away a $75 prize pack for Minwax. So, 3 things you have to do. Down below, you'll see I provided some pretty easy links for you guys. Like and follow Minwax, like and follow Purdy, and then comment down below in this show, and one person is going to be picked at random, and we're going to send you that $75 prize pack from Minwax. All right, so we have the grooves of the panels. Now we're going to the rails and the stiles, brushing away from the corners. And again, the process of a pro, it looks haphazard, but the goal is to keep a wet edge, which pros, when people say, how do you get even finish on walls? How do you get even finish on cabinets? It's keeping a wet edge, which means the finish is not drying at a certain part of the project and still wet in the other. That's how you get the most even, beautiful finish on projects. So what I do is, feels like a haphazard way of getting the finish on, but then you finish stroke to even out the finish. So again, we'll get in there in the grooves, make sure there's no finish pooled up in there. And again, a water-based finishing system is very forgiving, but the thing you'll notice differently about this versus solvent is that it will raise the grain just a little bit. So you gotta be really conscious of either water popping it right away or SVTing, sand, vac, and tack in between coats like that. This will preserve that beautiful sort of clear finish on something like this. You could definitely use a solvent over the top, but it will yellow a little bit more. All right, folks, so I'm going to run through some questions right now. We'll fire up. Oh, let me set this down here. Let's get this going here and see what questions we got from the viewers. This will take just a second, folks, making sure we're firing it up here. I appreciate everybody watching, too. This is a great thing, and I'm glad you could watch, and certainly any questions you have about wood finishing we can take care of here. All right, come on now. Okay, so again, if you're interested in joining the PCA, if you're interested in any of the locations of where to find this stuff near you, you can always go to the link I provided down for. That is the thing I would say. If you're interested in this, you can obviously contact me. I can connect you, but the link down below in the show notes is something that's going to get you to all these products that I talk about today. Not only the applicators, but the finishes and all that stuff too. So, all right, we'll find the show feed here. All right, lots of viewers, lots of comments. Thank you guys for this. I really do appreciate it. Clear wood finishing, or staining and varnishing, or SSV as we pros call it, is something that's very near and dear to my heart. And it is a little more complex, but man, when you master it, you can get some of these mahogany finishes and things like that, and it is truly satisfying. So, all right, let's get this in a full show here. Okay. All right, let's go through. Hammer Temple, how's it going, man? Good to see you. Would you do an oxalic wash when restoring furniture? I have an old desk and I'm restoring it. So what he's referring to, I use oxalic acid in my deck refinishing and sometimes interior wood finishing when we want to brighten something. Oxalic acid is a chemical. It's basically, it sounds like a very harsh chemical because it's got the word acid in it. It's basically what they put on the outside of sour candies to give it that tang. You use it to lighten wood. It actually reacts with the tannic acid in the wood and brightens it. So for our decks outside, we spray on a very thick solution of that, scrub it around, and it brings back that beautiful sort of cedary pine look to decks so we can stain it. Gets rid of the gray. When we use it inside, we will typically use it on windowsills, things that have turned dark with powdery mildew or water condensation stuff. If you were to use it on a piece of furniture, typically furniture doesn't suffer from water damage, but if you do want to lighten it or even remove water rings, oxalic acid is a good thing to try. It's just not a miracle product. Sometimes you have to use a combination of mechanical removal and a brightener like that. And sometimes you just go to the stain and wet sand it out. So, Hammer, good to see you, man. All right, Andrea Harris, sanding schedule for wood, grain filling tips. So, here's the deal. Grain filling in priming and painting wood is something that you can either fill the pores by back brushing or rolling, or you can actually fill the grain by using wood fillers and things like that and applying in many steps in sanding. I would say, Andrea, always think about the cost-benefit analysis of, you know, a typical oak door like that will cost $15, $20. How much of your labor would be in filling all those pores versus just getting a brand new door? So I would always say, from a pro's point of view, when somebody has a 37-piece oak kitchen and they say, we want all the grain filled razor smooth, I would say, honestly, for 50 or 60 bucks a door, you could probably get all new doors and we could guarantee you a razor smooth thing. Sanding schedule. I sand, in my company, Andrea, we have a process we call SVT, sand, vac, and tack. We do that at 2 stages through wood finishing processes. With water-based finishing, sometimes we'll throw in a third called water popping, which is preemptive. We'll apply water to the wood, raise the grain, let it dry, sand it back down. We'll apply the stain, and then we'll put the first coat of finish on, SVT again, and then do that. With solvent-based systems, typically we just give the wood a light SVT in prep. We stain, we apply the finish, no sanding in between staining and varnishing. When we varnish, then we SVT to smooth again, and then we put the final coat on. So one combination of those. All right. Beach house, you should really wear gloves. Oil soaks into the skin. Yes, so people always say wear gloves. I'm always one of those things where we have natural cleaners in my shop, the orange cleaners and things like that. And part of me wants to cut down on the thousands of rubber gloves that are being thrown away every year. So we use a very simple little, environmentally safe hand cleaner. When we do large scale finishing, like when we're staining wood all day, typically we'll do it just for the aesthetic thing of not having stain underneath your fingernails forever. But for little projects like this will come right out. And people do love wearing the gloves, but I'm always one of those things too where it's like the environmental impact as well. So, all right, let's see. Hammer Temple, thanks so much for giving back. Oh, absolutely, happy to do it. Graco GX19 is a great rig, I would agree. Cynthia, thank you, Nick, for making that distinction and recommendation to stick with the same base products, solvent and water. Yes, now again, you can get fancy, you can mix, but Cynthia knows it's you're gonna make your life a heck of a lot easier by sticking in a lane of solvent or water-based finishing. David Coles, thanks a lot. Jamie, I have some lower cabinet doors with scuffs, missing stain, pet scratches. It's a low budget touch up and I'm thinking about staining the bare wood to match using a stain poly mix match. So, great products, but understand what you're getting into. It does have some finish in it and it will likely be aesthetically different than your current cabinets. Now, one of the things that I don't have on my table here, but is an insanely effective tool, Minwax actually makes little stain pens. And we have a whole pile of these for my company for when we have little touch-ups. People ask us all the time, and when people have us come into their kitchen to touch up cabinets, I can pick out in my mind the 6 cabinet doors and drawers that need it the most. There's the 2 to 4 underneath the sink, there's a silverware drawer, there's the one probably nearest to the dishwasher, and there's probably the coffee cup cupboard up above, which gets the most hand use, which gets the most wear, and then we have to touch up. For me, there's basically 2 options for touching up or fixing this stuff. Do almost nothing or do the full Monty. Doing almost nothing is grabbing a Minwax stain pen and dabbing that in there to aesthetically make it go away. That's obviously not going to make a pet scratch go away. On the surface, it's not going to level it off, but aesthetically it'll make it go away, and that little bit of stain will protect it. Or I'm in favor of completely taking the door off, refinishing it, new stain to blend it all in, smoothing as you can, and new coats of finish. You can do intermediate steps in between there, but honestly, for me, it's either aesthetically make it go away or completely refinish. As a pro, that's the kind of lanes that I have to live in. Carolyn Olson, how's it going? What product would you recommend to remove old finish? So, back in the old days, there used to be this awesome product called methylene chloride, which would instantly strip almost every finish off of everything. It is pretty dangerous stuff though, and it is being phased out. It's not the most human-friendly product, but it is effective. So you probably cannot find that anymore. There's a whole host of water-based, friendly eco-strippers out there. I would urge you to get one of the more expensive ones, and if they have a pro grade in it, I would urge you to do that. The downside of the water-based strippers is they take longer. So what you're probably gonna have to do is cake it on pretty heavily, cover it with something to keep it wet, sometimes even let it dry overnight for a few days to get its full potency. Otherwise, what you'll have to do is many applications of it. But it is much human-friendly and it's much more environmentally friendly. That's what I would do. Definitely don't go after it with a heat gun and things like that. That can alter the wood. It's not environmentally safe. And if you're dealing with lead-based paint, you basically weaponize lead in your house when you're doing that. So, Jorn Vanderberg, thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it. Hammer Temple, thanks a lot, man. Riley Groves, good morning. Awesome. Greg Van Sickle, stain board to show the client is a great idea. Yes, those storyboards are super, super helpful. Fun things to do, too. All right, I enjoyed watching your amazing skills. Keep it going. Eli, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it. Like Minwax and Sherwin-Williams. All right, make sure you like Purdy as well, Evan. All right, love the water-based option. Yes, so what's interesting is that, obviously solvent-based stuff has been around since time and eternal. Water-based finishes are becoming more preeminent. And in fact, like I mentioned, on some new construction, when they say we want that whitewash look, that pickled look, that gray wash, where you actually take a gray version of that, or that driftwoody kind of look, you kind of have to use a water-based clear over the top in order to preserve that crystal clearness of it. So, Nick Nagel, I missed the whole live. Can you redo the lesson? Well, lucky for you, Nick, this is saved for time and eternal on Facebook, and it will be archived on YouTube forever. So you can actually go through when the show is done and watch it again as much as you want. This live show does not disappear. It'll be archived forever. Let's see. Oh, David Cole's tuning in with coffee. Absolutely. Ever use Minwax water-based Spar as it's stronger? We've been moving to that. Yes, that is a wonderful product, and I'm very happy to see those versions. So Minwax Helmsman Spar, the solvent version in a satin, is one of sort of like, I want to say favorite finishes that I use. We use it on when we do our exterior door refinishing processes, where we strip them all down, stain them with a Minwax stain, and then put Helmsman over the top. And what I love about Helmsman, the satin, is it not only does it protect, I mean, as you know, it's as advertised, but their satin is so sophisticated and beautiful. It looks like a good finish. Now, there are finishes that are protective and are easy to apply and things like that, and they look fine. But then there are some finishes where you look at them and you're like, oh yeah, that's like a pro finish right there. And it showcases the amount of effort you put into something. And that particular shine, that particular product builds to a certain film, has this beautiful shine, love it. Water-based versions are great as well. All right, Greg Van Sickle. Oh, I should mention this too. Lots of people, sometimes, now Spar Varnishes, and when we're talking about Spar Varnishes, we're talking about exterior clears. Sailboat varnish, marine varnish, yacht varnish, things like that. A spar is actually a name of a piece of a sailboat, one of those old wood pieces that is you know, functional on a sailboat. It's made for that exterior to stand up to UV, to stand up to water, but it's also made to be flexible. So sometimes people think that spar varnish is 10 times tougher than like a polyurethane and things like that, something like that. Really what it is, it's tough, but it's more flexible. So sometimes you have to be careful. I get a lot of people, especially in old house restoration forums, that like, you know what, heavens of Betsy, I'm using marine varnish on the floor of my house, and it's fine. It'll do good, but remember, it is a flexible varnish. It doesn't dry as hard as some of the polyurethanes. I like traditional oil varnishes for that reason. Not only are they beautiful, they're forgiving, but they are a little harder. And again, this is from 29 years of experience. I don't know the molecular structure of the two things, but I will tell you from almost 3 decades of experience, Spar Varnish is perfect for those pieces of wood outside that are moving with the elements. It also has a UV inhibitor in it. So typically, if I had the choice of having something be exposed to sun or water outside, I would choose water, surprisingly enough, because sunlight, the UV, will actually break down a finish in the wood fibers. It feels like a lot more quickly than water will. So one of the benefits of like a Spar Varnish or a Helmsman or a marine or a yacht varnish is that it actually is like sunblock for your door, and they actually recommend you recoat it every year. And the doors that I recoat every year are beautiful and they last the longest. So, Joran, all the way from the Netherlands, we love it. Love your tips, keep it up, use your gloves, yes, 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 yes. Guys, environmentally friendly orange cleaners are a wonderful thing. And again, it's one of those, like, I don't want to fill a landfill with a whole bunch of gloves here. So, Scotty Frayne, I've contacted the PCA about having a master class in Grand Rapids. Oh man, that would be awesome. So you can also contact me. I can help you get that set up in conjunction with the PCA. I've just released a calendar of a lot of my master's classes, and if anybody wants one in your area, the PCA is the place to contact. They will get the logistics going. They will tap me. I will hop in, and we will create an awesome day for you and anybody else who wants it. So thanks a lot, guys. David Cole's joining the PCA this week. You will not be disappointed. If you need any tips on where to find super knowledgeable people or how to interact with it, Marcia and Sydney at the PCA are your go-to people. And as always, I'm here for you too. I want to help. We all do better when we all do better. So, oh, this is what I'm talking about. Rue, how's it going, Rue? I have some 150-year-old hand-carved door, very ornate passageways. I want to brighten them up and restore them. What would be best to use? Since they're exterior, number one, what I would do is my process for this. So with exterior finishing, with staining and varnishing, I typically think of it more like a piece of furniture for entry doors. With decks, you want something that's more penetrating. Even with, like, you know, ornate tongue and groove, you know, cedar and pine porch ceilings, things like that. I use more of like a penetrating stain, something that moves a little more with the elements. But for front doors, I really like the stain and the 2 coats of a clear varnish sort of thing, a Helmsman satin. Typically, my process would be to strip all the stain and finish off a door. So we'll take the doors off, take all the hardware off, plastic off the entry of the home, lay them on sawhorses, strip all the finish off like that, rehang them, let them dry. Next day, come back, and again, this is labor intensive because we have to secure the house every day. After that stripper has dried, then I will go through a very light sanding process. The stripping process will take 97% of the stain and the finish out of the door, but what you want to do is just light finish sand, light SVT to even it all out, to get the remaining bits of old dried finish off there like that. That'll expose brand new bare wood, and that sanding process will even out the porosity. So then, the stain will take evenly. And then typically what we'll do is we will stain match. So again, depending on what stain you use, you can either get the wood something, dyed like this with a water-based stain and then pigment over the top. The only thing I will warn you is typically dyes or things with very, very bright water-based systems sometimes have a tendency to fade. So you got to pair them with a pigment stain like this. If you use a water-based stain, make sure there's enough pigment in there so it doesn't stain. But there's a lot of water-based dyes and things out there that if you don't cover it with a pigment stain, it will fade very rapidly. So 1 coat of stain, 2 coats of Minwax Helmsman Satin Spar. It's a beautiful finish and you will not be disappointed, especially if you spray it on. That stuff is just like, it looks different. It's a different finish. It's really good. Dave Pine, happy Saturday, always. Mark Huseland, what's funny is we're not using the acronyms for the process and procedures. However, I'm using the SVT as our SOP and speaking that language now. And again, this is cool. A lot of the things that I talk about, PBC, people be crazy, MPC, mass personal chaos, SVT, are just things that the military does for, they create acronyms to just ease the sort of operation of conveying information, SOP, standard operating procedure. One of the things that I thought was very effective from the military, and internally when we talk about stuff, if we have to say sand, vacuum, and tack rag every time, it gets wordy. So we use SVT, and everybody knows what it means, and that's a great thing. So Jim Cabrera, thank you so much. Jamie, thanks for the kind words. Oh, here we go. Kareem, Grace Valley, would you prefer sanding off stain or stripping stain off? All right, so this is interesting. If you take one of these cabinet doors and you attempt to sand all the stain off, you will alter the contours of the wood, especially all those nice sharp lines. As a pro, like when we, 2 instances, tabletop. Somebody wants a tabletop refinished. That's an instance where I actually will sand it off because it's flat and you can get it even. But when you have something intricate, like a cabinet door, something like that, when you have one of these like this, you will not effectively remove 100% of the stain and finish without altering the actual cabinet door. So at that case, just like with our entry doors, I like chemical strippers because the chemical does the work of getting the finish off, not you mechanically removing it like that. And you can actually preserve some of the patina on the door in historic work too. If any of you guys followed the Slavik house, hashtag Slavik house, we actually salvaged a 100-year-old school building. I took all the 100-year-old doors and I chemically stripped them because what happens is those doors were originally finished with clear shellac and no stain at all. But over 100 years, they actually turned this color. They went from this to this over the course of 100 years. As a restorationist and a lover of old homes, I did not want to get rid of that. That's called patina. You cannot replicate that exactly 100 years of patina like that as genuinely as that. So what I did is I chemically stripped off all the shellac, leaving that patina, that wood that's discolored. If you take a mechanical sander to an antique, a door or a salvage door like that, you will remove all that patina and start over with brand new fresh wood. Not bad, but different. And I like to preserve that patina. Eric, Steven, Achi, I've been painting 21 years and always learn great new information on your show. You deserve better production. For it, I'd watch. Yeah, man, listen, I do what I can with what we can. The next step is basically a full studio, but again, we got to keep it light. We got to keep it moving. So, Nick Nagel, thanks a lot. All right, be rewatching this one. Thanks for the stain. Very few local options for legit education and training. Robbie, this is a tough one. Painting a wall is pretty dang simple. There's a definite start line and different finish line and not many surprises in between. SSV, stain, sealing, and varnishing, or applying some sort of stain and some sort of clear coat. It can be tricky sometimes, depending on the client's wishes too. One of the biggest problems that we run into with this is a client will approve a stain sample, we get to the site, we actually stain the wood, and then because it's not an opaque paint color like this stuff behind me, they'll say, sometimes I just thought it would feel different, even though they have a stain sample approved and stuff like that. That doesn't normally happen with paint colors. Paint colors are opaque and they don't really surprise people a lot of the time. So, yep. Nick Nagel, let's see here. Do you recommend homeowners leave the home when doing stain and poly work? Not necessarily. In my company, what we do, we still use a bunch of oil primers, solvent-based clears and stuff like that. What we actually do is put filters in all the vents. We take furnace filters, we cut them up, and we put them all over the house to stop particles and a little bit of odor. And then we actually use negative air pressure and air scrubbers to get rid of, dispel a lot of the odor in a house. So we have high velocity sort of industrial fans, 12-inch fans, and with some flexible ducting. And typically what we'll do is the most effective way to get the smell or odor out of a house from anything, even water-based wood finishing has a certain smell to it. So does water-based wall paint. Typically what we'll do is we'll have one of those industrial fans at one end of a job site venting out a window like this. We'll go to the opposite end of the house, we'll crack open a window. This creates something called negative air pressure, which is it's that fan, when you blow it out a window, is actually pulling fresh air in through that window, through the job site, evacuating and turning over that air and evacuating out the other side of the house. It's the quickest way to cycle air through a house like that. It gets rid of particles, gets rid of odor, and creates a better finish in the house. So that's what we do. David, thanks a lot. Okay, let's see here. Let me check the show notes here. Some people are saying they can't see the links. Yeah, right now I'm going through the Facebook app on my phone. If those hyperlinks don't work, I'm seeing hyperlinks on mine right now. If they don't work, I will be in there and I will change those for you guys. But again, when the show is over, we're going to pick one person. We're going to send out a $75 prize pack from Minwax to you. Again, all you have to do is like and follow Minwax, like and follow Purdy, and then comment in the show below. Someone at random is going to be picked. And just like the old Purdy backpack winners and stuff like that, random winner, and we'll send it out to you. And then as always, when you get it, I would love to see a picture, tag me in it, and I'd love to see what you got going on with that. So, okay, let's get back down here. All right, Mark Huseland, really what it is, I understand varnish is made from a plant here in Southern California. It breaks down easily in the sun, so we use polyurethane. Your thoughts? Again, there's lots of options for you out there. Basically, the best advice I can give, and this is something we actually went deep on a comment earlier this week. Somebody was looking, and it might actually have been you, Mark, looking for a great process for staining and varnishing exterior stuff. At some point, it doesn't matter. You want to choose the appropriate finish, but sometimes the maintenance of that and the reapplication of it is more important than the product you pick. So I would say start off with a great Minwax Helmsman Satin Spar, but recoat it every year. That door will live on indefinitely. Indefinitely. That's basically like applying a layer of sunblock over and over again. So I would definitely do that. All right, let's see here. All right, Greg Van Sickle. Nick, what would you recommend for poly on top of refinished oak interior waiting room benches? So, interestingly enough, we're working on a project where we're gonna be refinishing about 100 pews in a church, and these pews are about 30 feet long a piece and stuff like that, and we're creating a super beautiful, super durable system for it, and it involves this stuff right here. This is the good stuff. So if you're interested in something like that, Minwax Performance Series, Minwax Polyurethane, Satin Polyurethane is a great product too. I've been super impressed by this stuff, the Performance Series, the Quick Dry Satin. Insanely durable, insanely beautiful, and it just sands beautifully too. It powders up nice. For the pros who've done it before, you know what powdering up means. It sands beautifully. It really showcases how much effort we put into stuff like that. And you know, I know from some projects in my house too, we got 4 kids that are actively trying to destroy my home. Stands up pretty well. And in the case where somebody really gets after it, I mean, half the tables that I refinish are refinished because somebody dumped nail polish remover, which is actually acetone, a great finish stripper on it. And then half of it is just wear and tear over decades. And the good thing about this stuff is I refinish my tables maybe once every like 3 or 4 years in my house, only because my kids get after it, man. We have family meals there. There's art projects. I mean, we're doing like, you know, my kids got into knife making for a while, so we're making knives, sharpening knives, all sorts of craft projects, stuff like that. And eventually I just like to freshen up the coats. And the good thing about systems like this is you're not going to run into any adhesion problems later on where, you know, like I said, once every 3 or 4 years, I lightly SVT some of the stuff in my house, throw another coat on, 2 hours later, you're back in business and there's no adhesion problems or anything else. So again, doing it right first is really important, but having the ability to maintain something is just as important, because if you go through 30 hours of work to restore the top of a table now, and 5 years later it's back in the same position and there's not a really easy way to get it back there, that's a failed sort of system. I want something that you can live with, that's durable, that's beautiful, but also you can work with in the rest of your life too. So, all right, let's see here. Sorry, following up on the questions here. Thank you so much. All right, we will go with the varnish on the next one too. We like to do 3 coats of clear. Mark, yes. So one of the things that I've gone back and forth over, sometimes when you run into these entry door restoration projects, some of them say you got to put on 3 to 8 coats first off. I say, you know what, I've had the best luck with keeping it simple for the clients. Stain it if they want stain, 2 coats of clear, and just have me back a year or 2 later. Every year or 2, just have me back. We'll put a refresher coat on. It's easy, in and out, and that door will stay good forever. So, Sean Swanson, what do you think about gel stains? I love them. I absolutely love them. So you guys, if you were following along in my shop over the last month too, we had an entire dining room set with, I don't know, was there maybe 8 chairs, a huge dining room table, 2 hutches, curio hutches next to it too, and they wanted them a different color. They were golden oak. And instead of stripping them down and stuff, what we did was SVT, and then I took one of our cup guns, one of our air compressor driven sort of HVLP cup guns, and I used gel stain, Minwax gel stain. I thinned it down a little bit so it would spray a little more evenly, and then I basically overlaid or overstained or toned all those pieces with it. So gel stain's a wonderful thing. I absolutely love this stuff. It's very tricky inside to get even finishes if you hand apply, but if you give it a little bit of practice, handrails, cabinet doors, things like this, you can get it done. It's a great product. I would always say just make sure you SVT before you do it. If you have pre-finished like golden oak in your house with some lacquer on it, you do want to go through that SVT process and then overlay the gel stain just to make sure. And my preference always too with any gel stain is that it is a finish, but I always like to cover it with another finish just to make sure it's protected. Let's see. Mark, thanks a lot. I do appreciate it. All right, guys, I think we've got to the end of the messages. Thank you guys so much. We've been going over an hour now. I will be manning this. If you guys have any other questions, you can let me know. Also, the giveaway. Somebody who likes and follows Purdy, likes and follows Minwax, and comments on this show here is going to be chosen for that prize package from Minwax, and we're going to send that out shortly. The PCA. The Painting Contractors Association. Thank you all for joining. Thank you all for interacting with me. Excuse me. Over the next decade, we're going to change this industry and the trades as a whole. We need thoughtful, progressive, aggressive craftspeople and entrepreneurs to get involved and change this industry. So I'm here for you. You're here for me. Let's all do this together because we all do better when we all do better. What I would like you to do, if you like any of this stuff today, any of these systems, obviously you can get a hold of me, but I would tell you there is a link in this show to show you where you can get this stuff. Luckily enough for me, 1 mile down the road is this stuff in a store. Another 15 miles that way is another store with different stuff and more stuff like that. If you're interested in any of this stuff, I can help you with the processes. That link can show you where to get the stuff. And as always, I would love to see your projects so you can post pictures, anything like that. Thank you guys. This means the world to me. Like this show, follow Ask a Painter. Take care of our underwriters, Minwax, Purdy, PCA, and share this show. It's the kindest thing you can do for me. This show is for the thoughtful contractor. find more people like this, share the show, tag them in it. Let's get more people involved and let's change the trades, folks. So, all right. Have a good weekend, everybody. I'm punching out for family time, but I will be manning this occasionally to answer any other questions you have. So have a good weekend, everybody.